Around 36 million women across the United States are on the verge of losing their right to legal abortion. A draft document leaked a couple of weeks ago suggests that the Supreme Court has decided to overturn the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision, which legalized abortion across the country. Although the justices of the top court are expected to issue a ruling in late June or early July, it has triggered widespread protests and demonstrations in cities across the United States. A legislation to make abortion legal throughout the country was defeated in the US Senate on the 11th of May amid stiff Republican opposition. The move was meant to counter the Supreme Court's expected ruling banning abortions in America. So what's going to happen? Will the women in America lose their constitutional right to access abortion? What will be the implications if Roe versus Wade is struck down? How will the decision reverberate around the world? That's the global debate. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teena. I'm pleased to welcome on the global debate tonight an eminent panel of experts from different parts of the world. Joining me from the United States is Ms. Sherry Berman, Professor of Political Science, Barnard College, Columbia University. Ms. Carolyn Egan, spokesperson for the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada. Ms. Katarzyna Jeszak, Attorney at Law, Director of Center for Medical Law and Bioethics, Poland. And Ms. Danielle Roberts, she's an activist at the Alliance for Choice, Ireland. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program on Sansad TV. Professor Berman, allow me to begin the program today with you. Your thoughts on the latest developments in the United States. The legislation to make abortion legal throughout the country has been defeated in the Senate. And of course, the leaked Supreme Court document now suggests the top court is poised to overturn Roe versus Wade. The question is the United States on way to becoming a global outlier on abortion?
So let me make clear first to your listeners that what the Supreme Court has done or may very well do is not outlaw abortion, but basically say that there is no constitutional right to abortion, thereby returning the question of abortion to the democratic process at the state level and at the national level. So should the leaked document reflect the ultimate decision that will come down in the summer, this does not mean that abortion is being outlawed in the United States. It means that the court is saying that there is no constitutional right to abortion, which is why the Democrats tried unsuccessfully to pass a law at the national level, which would say that abortion was something that all American women should have access to. Now, having failed, what that will mean initially is that in the states in the United States where abortion is legal, abortion will remain legal. Women in New York, where I live, will continue to be able to get abortions. In more conservative states, in Republican states, those states will undoubtedly pass laws either outlawing or greatly restricting abortion, thereby meaning that women who live in those states will not have easy access to abortion.
And before I go across to other guests for their perspective, Professor Berman, something very quickly that we would like for our viewers to understand is, in the United States, there is a president in the White House at the moment who supports abortion rights. His party controls the Congress, also largely supports reproductive rights of women. The public opinion is largely in favor of upholding women's rights to abortion access, of course, with certain restrictions. What then has brought the United States to a stage where more than 36 million women are on the verge of losing access to abortion?
Well, that's really a great question. And the problem there is twofold. One is the American public is extremely polarized. And so the folks who are most active in the Republican Party tend to be the most conservative. Those are the ones who are most opposed to abortion rights. It has become an extremely polarizing issue in the United States and one that motivates activists on both sides of the spectrum. So part of the reason is that the Republican Party does not fully reflect even all Republican voters in the sense that it is much more conservative on this issue, as you said, than general public opinion. But the second issue is that we have a very strange situation in the United States now, politically and institutionally, where to pass contentious national laws, you no longer need a majority, you need a supermajority, because we have something in place called a filibuster, which, by the way, now the Democrats are going to defend to the death, because should the Republicans regain control of the House and Senate in November after the midterms, which it looks quite probable that they would be able to pass national legislation without the filibuster on abortion. So the problem for the Democrats is that they can't muster enough votes to pass even among their own caucus, but certainly not over the objections of Republicans also at the national level.
Absolutely. So several factors there playing out, but the fact is women are on the verge of losing out on this basic right, a basic access to abortion. Ms. Carolyn Egan, let me come across to you for your perspective. Now, as someone who's worked closely towards decriminalizing abortion in Canada, what is your response to what's happening in your neighborhood? And if the court goes ahead with striking down Roe v. Wade, could it have implications in Canada too?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I think across the board in this country, we share a long border with the United States. There was a real upset and anger, or whatever the words are appropriate to use, when we saw that leaked document. And you're absolutely right. We've had a long struggle in Canada. In 1988, our Supreme Court made a historic decision, the Morgentaler decision, and it made abortion very, very much more accessible to people across this country. We still have struggles. We're a very large country, rural areas. Some provinces have not provided the service in the way they should have. But I think that we understand that the struggle that's going on in the United States needs support and solidarity, and we certainly will be prepared to give it. I will say that in the 1980s, before our 88 Supreme Court decision, thousands of Canadian women went to the United States, in Washington State, in the West Coast, in New York State, in the New England states, from the Atlantic provinces, and accessed clinic abortions there. And I think there's been a lot of discussion here, doing all we can. If what happens, if Roe v. Wade actually goes down, what happens that so many may be denied. I think there's been a lot of discussion about what we can do on the border states that are in close geographic proximity to areas where abortion may be made very inaccessible. We will do what we can. But I think in the United States, our experience here, and I think maybe other countries around the world, it's been large movements for change that has made the difference. And that's what has to happen. I'm assuming people are doing that in the United States. But I would also like to say, you used the word outlier, and I think that's actually a very good word, because if you look around the world, generally speaking, things are moving in a pro-choice direction, or a direction to support reproductive justice. If you look at Argentina, South Korea, Mexico, so many other countries, Ireland, and my sister will speak of that, I'm sure. We are in a situation where people are saying this is a right, it's a basic health right, and we will do everything we can to support international solidarity wherever people are struggling for this basic human right.
Ms. Roberts, as someone who's representing an organization here that works towards making reproductive healthcare more accessible, which includes abortion, what ramifications do you see of the anticipated court decision in America? And do you think it could set a wrong precedent worldwide?
Yeah, I think whenever things happen in America, quite often we can expect similar actions to happen elsewhere. But yes, we've seen the massive, green wave across South America and liberalisation. In Northern Ireland, we recently secured decriminalisation. And in the South, the Republic of Ireland, there was a referendum which legalised abortion. And actually, what's interesting there is it was a constitutional ban on abortion, which then was repealed. So I suppose there's some similarities there that we can draw on. We also know that a lot of our quite active anti-choice groups have ties to the United States. There's a Stanton Healthcare clinic in Belfast, which is a rogue crisis pregnancy centre, which tries to direct people away from abortion information, and it's the only one outside of the United States, and it's in Belfast. So there is links between anti-choice activists and also potentially funding links. But there's also massive links between pro-choice activists, and that's where the solidarity is really important for us to show. We had, whenever the news broke about Texas, we had a rally in Belfast. to send solidarity to Texas. We have a letter to America about to be published because we know what it's like to be criminalised. Up until just 2 years ago, we were criminalised in Northern Ireland. And while we have a better law now, we don't have access. So I think what we can do is share our learning about how people can safely manage their own abortions and different, lobbying tactics that we have used, and also just to send practical support as well. Donating to independent abortion funds. We have the Abortion Support Network in the UK, which supports people travelling from Ireland, Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man, lots of places where up until recently, the Isle of Man changed its law recently as well. So they have expanded their services into Malta, and we need to keep supporting the practical side of things to make sure that people who need abortions get access to them.
Let me get into the discussion, Ms. Katrina Jeszka, as well, to understand, because Poland, when we talk about the abortion debate, Ms. Jeszka, Poland finds mention among the select few countries with the toughest abortion laws. And recently there have been protests as well, in fact, until a few months ago. Help us and our viewers understand what governs these tough abortion laws in your country.
What governs is our basic articles of our constitution, the international agreements that we are bound by. What is the main one of the main articles in Polish constitution is the protection of human life. It is not defined where this life begins in the constitution, but we have it defined in other Polish acts. To take the whole legal situation, the whole spectrum of this, this must lead our constitutional tribunal to make such a decision. And this is not a decision that it was surprising, this judgment from October 2020, because our constitutional tribunal in 1997 has just ruled that human life needs to be protected from the very beginning, even before the birth. And it complies with the provisions, for example, of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, when it mentions that the child needs legal protection after the birth and the same before the birth.
A majority of public opinion, nearly 74%, according to some surveys, 74% of people in Poland are not happy with these regressive laws. Is it being reconsidered to factor the public opinion?
Yes, of course, our government takes into consideration women's health. But on the other hand, we don't have the international or here in Poland locally established reproductive rights or health. In Poland, we have a program for procreation rights, and we have several services which include protection of pregnant women, perinatal care, and all the diagnosis. And which, however, it does not include the abortion, as it is not a healthcare. I would like to say one more thing about what Mrs. Roberts said, that there is no legal protection of human life. Of course, it is. And it's not only in Poland, but it's international legal protection. And may I just say about a Charter for Fundamental Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Convention on the Rights of a Child, as I mentioned, and European Convention on Human Rights.
But why is it then being opposed by women in your own country? Why have they turned to the European Court of Human Rights, saying that their right to choose is being questioned, is being curbed?
This is the same situation as in other countries which has legalized the abortion. There are pro-life protests demanding to ban the abortion. It's just the same situation. Our society is has different attitudes to that problem.
In all of these countries which have tough abortion laws and where several women have been protesting that their right to choose is being curbed, the fact is that a majority of public opinion is against these laws. That's the bigger worry. And that's going to be the challenge even in the United States. Do you agree that a law that has existed for over 5 decades in a country like the US, 5 individuals who do not like certain provisions can now or have the power to actually strike them down, making it extremely difficult, particularly for the vulnerable, the marginalized women who will not have the resources to travel to other states in case they want an abortion?
Yes, well, I think it's an extraordinary situation that a law that has been in place for 50 years and where people have been brought up expecting that the right to abortion is part of their health care with problems in varying areas, it's reprehensible in my mind. And the thing is, the decision to have an abortion should be an individual decision. If you choose not to, then that's your right. But if you choose to, then that's also your right. And no one who is opposed to abortion should be able to put a law in place that denies you that. And we know around the world, and we know in countries like Canada and the US, people will take the step and do illegal abortions, and that results in women being maimed and dying. And I think you're absolutely correct when you say it is the most vulnerable. We surely know in this country that it is women from the Black communities, other racialized communities, from indigenous reserves in the North, women who have little economic resources. They do not have the right to move. They don't have the right, the accessibility to the procedure, where someone who is more middle class or upper class has the economic wherewithal to go out of country, to go out of state, to go out of province. And it's a terribly inequitable situation. And we know that is going to suffer. And I think no state, I mean, we used to have a chant, not the church, not the state, women must control their fate. And I think that's exactly where we're coming from. And I will say, in this country, there was just a most recent poll that showed 4/5 of Canadians believe abortion should be accessible. And that is hugely important. And I think it's the work of the movement that's done it. And even in our country, the Conservative Party, none of the mainstream parties are saying that they want to reopen the abortion debate in Canada. And this is hugely important. And so I think you're absolutely right in pointing out who will suffer. And no one has the right to make that decision for anyone else. And any law that puts that on the books, has been on the books, it's got to be changed, because it's just inequitable and unfair in every possible way.
And in the weeks to come, do you think if Joe Wade is struck down, there could be an influx of women coming into Canada from different states of United States in case they need an abortion and they are not allowed? If the states come up with their own laws, if Roe v. Wade is struck down?
Well, there's certainly been discussion with women in the United States about that. I mean, I unfortunately today you need a passport to cross the border. Back in the 80s, you did not. It was much easier. Who has the resources to do it? Who has the money to do it? But I think this country, people have already been calling us saying, if American women are coming, they can stay at my house. If you need places, just coming forward in that kind of way, it's very moving. And I think on some of the border states, like Ontario and New York, Windsor is right across the river from Detroit. And I know Michigan women, they're already thinking about it. They're talking about it. Probably there'd have to be a clinical facility set up there in the same way facilities were set up in Buffalo when we needed them, years back. So I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't have to happen. Hopefully people will be able to find resources within their own country. But if not, I will tell you, we will do everything we can to make the procedure as accessible as possible for those who choose it.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, the fact that what's happening in a country like United States has certainly some kind of impact. It reverberates around the world, as you pointed out earlier too. Do you see this spilling over to, especially to those countries where abortion remains a contentious issue and where religious doctrine somewhere takes precedence over the right to choose, especially when it comes to women's rights? And is that a worrying trend?
I think it is definitely a possibility that this bolsters people with anti-choice viewpoints. I would like to reflect back on some of the discussion that's happened already and mention that there's a joint statement between UN committees on the elimination of discrimination against people with disabilities and the elimination of violence and discrimination against women, that both committees came out and jointly said that protecting the access to abortion was a human rights issue. So I think it's disingenuous to say that abortion is disability discrimination. We know there's plenty of people who are disabled themselves who need access to abortion. Abortion is a disability rights issue as well. And it's through mechanisms like UN CEDAW and international things that, inquiries and judicial challenges, that is how we strengthened our case for change here in Northern Ireland. And then ultimately in the Republic of Ireland, it went to a public vote. So I just would like to respond to those comments already made, that there is no human right to life that predates being born. There's no prenatal life or prenatal right to human rights. This is very much about the people who need access to abortions. Reproductive rights are human rights, and that's something that we can't state enough. And more than that, we need reproductive justice where people can choose to parent and be supported to parent if they decide to, and also choose not to. So I just was a bit concerned, as those are quite often discussions that we see happening in our local Northern Ireland Assembly, particularly from parties with an overrepresentation of evangelical Christians who all of a sudden have concerns about people living with disabilities when their policies continually vote against cutting funding and cutting supports. But then when it comes to the so-called abortion debate, all of a sudden they care about disability rights. Okay. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to bring that in. And that's something we've seen in the campaign for the referendum as well. We saw images of people with Down syndrome being used. And it's not a level of campaigning that I would want to engage in. Because again, I know I've used the word a few times, but disingenuous is just the word that comes to mind for it. And the impact of the debates in America, we'll see the same arguments being made here by our politicians. We'll see the same arguments being made in Poland, in Malta, in so many places.
Professor Berman, so what happens in the court? Obviously, the leaked document is said to be the first draft. What actually is the final ruling is something for which we'll have to wait until late June, early July. But help me understand, how is it playing out politically in the United States? How are abortion rights? And of course, it's been a contentious issue in the US politics for decades. How do you see this changing the dynamics of midterm elections this time around?
So that's really the question that everybody in the States is talking about right now. I mean, this issue will galvanize activists on both sides of the aisle. Unfortunately, it's not clear to me that it matters as much to the vast majority of people in the middle as standard bread and butter issues do. So when we speak about the midterm elections in particular, which are coming up in November, and which of course will have an impact on the representation in both houses of Congress and therefore affect the Democratic and Republican party's ability to pass legislation, it's very unclear that this will make a huge difference. Anybody who tells you they know how it's going to play out is lying. But, this has been an issue that has activated, again, people who care very much about reproductive rights and who think very much that abortion should be outlawed. So I suspect that you will see a lot of activism around this in the upcoming elections, but whether it will make a huge difference to the vast majority of people in the middle, I think is very unclear. If you look at survey data, even though you have a majority that favors some access to abortion, although less than exists in a lot of states currently, most people, perhaps unfortunately, do not rank it super high on their list of things that they think about when they go to the ballot box. Perhaps that will change as activism about this ramps up in the next several weeks and months. As I think you've already mentioned, there have been protests already. There are significant protests planned in my own state of New York next week. I want to end just by saying something that I believe sort of takes off on some of the comments that my colleagues here have made, which is Ireland is a very interesting case because there was a constitutional ban on abortion. Again, what is happening here, and this is very important for politics, right, is not that the Supreme Court is banning abortion. It is simply saying, and indeed a lot of people on the left do not entirely disagree with this, that this is not something that is protected by our Constitution. That is to say, something that is inherent in the rights that are enumerated within our Constitution. It is not saying that laws cannot be passed. Indeed, what Alito's ruling says is that this is something that should be decided by the democratic process. And if you look at most countries, in fact, that is indeed precisely how it has been decided. That is to say, legislation has been passed, legalizing or making even more accessible abortion rights.
The question is, can there be a pushback? What we know so far is the unprecedented leaked document was the first draft. Is there a possibility that in the wake of these protests, the demonstrations, can there be a pushback?
Well, I would certainly hope so. I mean, obviously, I'm in a different country than the United States, but I would think so. And we've certainly seen the way we progressed in this country, that it was a broad movement made up of unions, faith organizations, students, people from every community. And that is what influenced our Supreme Court using our Charter of Rights to say, yes, abortion should not be criminalized. And so I do believe very much in the collective power of people. And I'm hoping it will be probably a long struggle in the United States. But in the end, I feel we will win it. But it's got to be, as Sherry and Danielle and others have said, we've got to just work so hard to make that happen and change the consciousness of those who are opposing it and let them believe what they believe. But please allow anyone who thinks differently from you to have the right to access the abortion, because it's not your role to diminish rights and to outlaw something that is so fundamental to those who choose it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Professor Berman, so one final comment very quickly from you. There are several countries that have had a hard-fought struggle. They have had it their way. So there have been laws that have been liberalized. Abortion has been decriminalized in several countries. If demonstrations, protests, and movements continue in the United States, the women, as you said, come together and fight for their right. Do you think there could be a pushback? And looking at the majority of public opinion in consideration, can the ruling be somewhere different to what's being anticipated right now?
Well, of course, as my colleagues have said, and as the Irish case and other cases show, most recently in Latin America, yes, of course, laws can be changed, but something this contentious requires a long-term process and very broad-based coalitions. I hope that is what we get in the United States. Convincing more people in California and New York that abortion should be safe and legal is not really the problem now. It's convincing people, as Ms. Egan said, in other places, that this is something that they should allow women access to, perhaps with some compromises as to, abortion limits. In most European countries, we see things at about, 14 weeks, something around that nature. Compromises might very well be possible at some point, but it's going to require a lot of planning. It's going to require broad-based coalitions. It's going to require ways to speak to those, as Ms. Egan said, who are not already persuaded, rather than just riling up those who already are.
Absolutely. So I think what's also important is, apart from changes in laws, changes in mindsets are equally important. So it's important for the world to respect women's reproductive rights and, give them the assurance that their reproductive rights, their freedom to choose is something that nobody can fiddle with. So time is running out. I'll have to wrap up the discussion. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your perspectives with us and our viewers on Sansad TV. It was indeed a pleasure having all of you on the program today. Thank you once again. So that's it from us on this edition of the Global Debate. Thank you very much to all our viewers as well for their time. See you again next week. Thank you once again.